Your last lecture of the school year is on the most recent history surrounding the presidencies of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. The 2016 presidential election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton was, for lack of better terms, a steaming train wreck. The two squared off in presidential debates and looked like children at a playground fight. If you treat an election like a prize fight, and that's what the media treated it like, that's exactly what you're going to get. The argumentative, rude, nasty interactions back and forth between the two. You had terms like crooked Hillary being thrown at Hillary Clinton. You had terms like a basket of deplorables being thrown back at anybody who supported President Trump. And what ultimately won President Trump a term in office was winning what's known as the Rust Belt states. So once states of heavy industry that have since seen a big downturn in domestic production, particularly in manufacturing and textiles, when a lot of those things either were automated or went overseas, states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, these were states that had been historically either Democratic, in the cases of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, or a swing state that had gone very closely to either parties, like Ohio. And President Trump won these states by promising lower middle class, particularly the white working class individuals, that he was going to get tough on countries like China and improve the economic situation here in the United States. So he got a lot of these lower middle class, particularly the white working class voters, to come out and vote for him. And he won these Rust Belt states and therefore the presidency. His presidency was not without controversy, as a matter of fact. It was probably one of, if not the most, controversial presidencies in history. Issues like a border wall, as pictured here. Was it even necessary? Could it, even if it was necessary, be effective? Getting tough on China, such as tariffs against goods coming from China. Is that good or bad for the United States and global economies? Things like tax reform, lower rates, very similar to what Ronald Reagan did in the 80s, particularly the lowering of the corporate tax rate. Was this beneficial to the economy or harmful to the economy? COVID-19 and the response. Was the coronavirus too aggressively reacted to with lockdowns? Or was it not aggressive enough and allowed to flourish as a virus unnecessarily? And then you had two different impeachments. One in which President Trump was accused of bribing a foreign government to dig up dirt on his political opponents, particularly now President Biden, the government of Ukraine, and threats to cut off U.S. funds to Ukraine without the investigation. And then a second impeachment as he was leaving office, when there was the infamous Capitol riot after the Senate met to certify the 2020 election results in President Biden's favor. So again, some of the 2020 election issues. Was President Trump's COVID response too much? Was it too little? That's something that's still debated in the media, and he's not even president anymore, and may never have a definitive conclusion to that question, because it's all philosophical. The what-ifs are often hard to answer. President Biden had some controversies surrounding he and his family during the presidential campaign, such as his son Hunter's laptop and emails that often referred to the big guy. And who is the big guy? Was it President Biden himself? Was it someone else? And if it was President Biden, does that mean that there is definitive corruption within the Biden administration? Again, a lot of these what-ifs, you can't really give definitive answers to them without more information, and that might not be information that people ever see. And then, of course, throughout 2020, there was a lot of rioting. There's a lot of turmoil in 2020 with the coronavirus pandemic. And after the murder of George Floyd by a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota, there were some Black Lives Matter protests that spiraled out of control across the country and spiraled into full-blown riots, and entire shopping developments were burning and things like that. That it's not how things started, but it quickly spiraled out of control. And again, the protest at the Capitol in D.C. on the day of the certification of the Electoral College vote in the Senate, that protest spiraled out of control into a full-blown riot as well, in which people breached the security of the Capitol building, and the members of Congress in the Capitol building needed to shelter in place and be protected by armed security. And the most current of all this is the Biden presidency itself. There's a lot of criticism surrounding the Afghanistan withdrawal. You can see a photo here of the Kabul International Airport and the number of refugees attempting to flee before the Taliban government gained full control of the country. You have a resurgence of the COVID-19 virus. There was a resurgence of the virus despite his promises to eradicate the virus, and continuing supply chain issues that led to a lot of increased inflation and questions over government spending. How much is too much? In the window of time from the beginning of the pandemic, which is right about here, to now, and what is projected into the future, you can see that drastic increase in spending. Was it necessary? Wasn't it necessary? Was only some of it necessary? And President Trump is responsible for some of that spending because he was president at the beginning of the pandemic. However, President Biden, once he took office, sent out even more stimulus funding into the economy that some economists say is what is contributing to the upward trend and, in fact, record inflation that hasn't been seen since the days of Jimmy Carter leaving office and Ronald Reagan coming into office in the late 70s and early 80s. So these are issues that have yet to even be fully understood because they're still happening. That is the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, I'll see you in class.